And please remain standing for our karakia and waiata. Thank you.
Ino I tātou, te maha i ngāne hirapono te tokotori tapu, kia tatu mai ana koutou ki wainganui ki tēnei whakamuimuti o mātou. Hei tā taringa kupu katoa, e whakapua ki nāne mātou i roto i tō koutou kororitanga. Ko koutou nei hoki te timatanga, me te whakaotinga mai o a mātou, e tumanako atu nei i roto i tō koutou kororitanga, te māngai hei tautoko mai, ai nei, āke nei, ai. The way out to whakamoimiti this morning is Te Aroha. Feel free to sing if you know the words. Te Aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e tātou tātou e ano. Te aroha, te whakapono, me te rangi mari e tātou tātou e. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora koutou morena, ladies and gentlemen. On day 2 of our contextual hearing, my colleagues and I, Dr. Andrew Edeweti on my left, Judge Coral Shaw, Alimuamua Sandra Alofivai and Paul Gibson look forward to today's hearing, and can I invite you to open proceedings, Mr. Mount.
Atamarie e te tiamana. I'm joined today by Chris Merrick and Julia Spellman from our Council Assisting team, and Mr. Merrick will call today's witnesses.
Thank you, Mr. Merrick and Ms. Spellman. Good morning.
Tēnā koutou ngā kumihana, kai kumihana, o te rā kia tātou katoa ko hui mai nei tēnei ata, mo tēnei rā whakahirahira, o te rā tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira. Tika ana kia tukumihi ki te mana whenua, a rātou I whakatū tēnei hui, I huaki I ngā kupu whakamoemiti ki te atua, kia pai ai tēnei rā kia tātou. No reira, kei te mihi. Acknowledgements to all of us gathered here today, to the commissioners, and just pay an acknowledgement to Mana Whenua, Ngāti Whātua o Rākei, who opened our hui today with our karakia and waiata whakamoemiti, so that we may start the day well. I'll start by calling the first witness, Dr. Rawiri Waretini Karena. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
Can I, in terms of the Inquiries Act, Dr. Waretini, commence your contribution by asking you, do you solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence you will give before this commission will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Waretini Karena, in front of you there is a volume of documents Yes, and if you go to tab 4 of that, we'll find a copy of a brief of evidence prepared by you.
Yes.
Now, can you just refer to that and just confirm that that is a copy of the brief of evidence prepared by you and filed with this Royal Commission of Inquiry?
I confirm that it is.
And you confirm that the contents of that brief of evidence are true and correct, best of your knowledge?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I'm going to start by asking, by way of introduction, ko wai koe, no hea koe. Who are you and where are you from?
Kia ora mai koutou katoa. Te me tuatahi e honere he korea ki te ata, he maungarongo ki te whenua, he whakaara pai ki ngā tangata katoa. Te me tuarua ki te mehi kingi, ki te kingi tuheitea. E noho mana tahua tapu o tātou mātou tupuna, pai marere.
Pai marere.
Ko ai au, ki te taha toku pāpa, ko tānu i te waka. Taupiri rawa ko kareoi o ku maunga. Waikato te iwi, whangaro te moana. Ngā te mahuta, ngā te mahanga, o ku iwi, ngā te koata, toku hapu, ko tūrango wawai rawa ko poe hakena o ku maraere, ko tūheitia te tangata. Ki te taha toko mama, no ngā puhi nui tonu, ngā te kāhu, te apauri, ngā te hine, ngā te manua, ngā te pātua. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Kia ora. Dr. Waretini Karena, in your brief of evidence, you've outlined some of your qualifications. Do you care to share some of those with us this morning?
I have a PhD in philosophy. My specialist field is Maori experiences of historical intergenerational trauma. That's my PhD thesis. I'm a PhD lecturer at Te Whare Wānau o Awanuarangi Indigenous University in Whakatane. Let's see, I'm a Ngāre me Visi 28th Māori Battalion Doctoral Scholar, Te Ata Whāteo Doctoral Scholar, Wakato Tānui Doctoral Scholar. I've just finished as National President for Te Whare Ki Tautoko, which is national governing body for Māori counselling, social work, social services. I've been in the education field 22 years. My specialist area of teaching is counselling, social work, mental health. I am a High Counsellor in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm co-chair for the Kingitanga Academic Panel. So I do research on behalf of the Māori King. I'm also on the Board of Trustees for Endowment College. And yeah, that's what I can think of at the moment.
And well, thank you for that.
Oh yeah, I'm also executive member of the New Zealand Council. So
New Zealand Māori Council, is that right? Yeah. Have you also given evidence in the Waitangi Tribunal on 3 occasions?
Yes, I have. 2016, 15, 16, I was involved in with Tom Himapo and his Waitangi Tribunal claim.
That's the corrections claim?
With the corrections
known
claim,
as the corrections
yes.
claim?
Yes. And so my evidence was used in that area. And what I submitted is that legislative policies which removed Māori land, language, culture, identity, heritage also contribute to Māori experiences of crime. If you look at the whakapapa, a lot of the crime comes from poverty. And for Maori, it's intergenerational poverty. And that poverty stems from dispossession.
Were you also involved in the prisoner voting rights inquiry?
Yes, yes, I was also involved.
As a witness in that case?
As a claimant.
As a claimant?
Yes.
And are you involved as a claimant in the Maori in state care claim currently before the tribunal?
The Oranga Tamariki claim, yes.
In your brief of evidence at paragraph 15, you've referred to as a foundation really to start your kōrero
Yes.
to Te Tongi a Tāwhiao.
Yes.
Would you share that with us this morning?
Sure. Te Tongi a Tāwhiao came about as a result of the Waikato invasion in 1863, in fact 20 years after. So my people, after they were invaded, they went into exile in Ngāti Maniapoto for 20 years. But when they came out of exile and they went back to their homeland, they found all their sacred sites destroyed. The place where I used to work, Waikato Institute of Technology, called Wintec. The original name of that place is Te Kōpū Mania or Kirikiriro. It was the marakai of the Waikato. It used to go from the top of the hill all the way down to the river. It fed the whole of the Waikato, and the other produce they collected, they sent it to Auckland to feed the people there. So they bulldozed half that hill. But up the top of that hill, where the marae sits, was an ahure, or an altar, where our priest met. And they would do their karakia. And their karakia was so that the land would be fertile to grow. When our people came back and they saw that, they were very distraught. They were in despair. Over 1 million acres of land was taken. So the connection to the whenua was cut. And they were looking for a vision, a way out of this turmoil that they were going through. And the Maori king at the time, Tāwhiao Potatu Te Wherewhoro, came up with this tongi. And it says, Mākua noe hange e toko ne whare, ko te tā hu he hino, ko ngā paupau he mahue he patete. And what he was saying is that our house will be rebuilt. But what's really interesting about it is that when they built marae, when they built wharenui, they used kauri, they used tōtara. These are the rangatira trees. But in this instance, Tāwhiao is referring to the mahue, the patete, the hino. Now, they aren't the rangatira trees. They are the common trees that you find in the forest. But there's a big difference between the rangatira trees and the common trees. If you apply pressure to the rangatira trees, they break. But the common trees, they're wiry. They're actually quite resilient. You can actually bend them, add water, add fire to them, and they'll actually bend. So my interpretation is this, that the world will be rebuilt, or the house will be rebuilt, not by the rangatira, not even by the chiefs, but it will be rebuilt by the power of the common people. And so when I look at that, and I see these people getting up here and giving evidence for the first time in this Royal Commission, you know what I see? I see resilience. Like those trees, they're resilient. They're re-emerging and sharing those stories that haven't been shared before. Why? Because this is about restoration. And so the whole story of the Tongea Tāwhia is about resilience, re-emergence, and restoration.
Kia ora. You've touched on some of the historic places for Waikato in your earlier kōrero.
Yes.
And in your brief of evidence, you've discussed, albeit briefly, made some comments around the genesis of Maori child abuse or pre-colonial tiakitanga or caring of children.
Sure.
Would you have anything to share with us today under that topic?
Can I refer to the model that I want to show up?
Sure.
Oh. So what you have here, these are 4 generations of my family. Over here, it tells who they are. Over here, it tells a little bit of their story. And over here, right on the far right, are all the legislative policies that each generation was subjected to. And so what it allowed me to do was get an understanding of the legislative environment each generation of my family was subjected to. So I want to talk about the one at the top first. But it's actually more than that. This is about my great-grandfather, Te Nahu, Rawiri Waretini Karena. But it's also about his grandfather, Retamana Te Manea, and his father, Te Ahu o Te Rangi Wharepu. All of them fought at Rangirehe. What's significant about Te Ahu o Te Rangi Wharepu, he is the older half-brother of Tāwhia o Te Whiriwhiri, the second Maori king. So as a result of losing over acres of land, what that highlights is generations of my family who became destitute, who became intergenerationally impoverished as a result of the Waikato invasion. The next photo, that's my grandfather. Now, he was brought up by Princess Tapoia. He could only speak Te Reo Māori. In 1930, he was taken away by the Social Welfare Department. He was put in a mainstream school. He was beaten and abused until he learned to speak English. As a result of that, he wouldn't teach Māori me ona tikanga to the next generations because of what he went through. So as a result, I have 200 of my own family who have never been on a marae. They don't know te reo me ona tikanga because of what happened to my grandfather. My father was born in the aftermath of World War II. His father went away and fought for the 28th Māori Battalion. They fought for rights of citizenship. They fought to become equal partners in the Treaty of Waitangi. As successful as they were, when they came back, the land that they had was taken and given to the settler soldiers. As a result, it left them wandering aimlessly from town to find work. When they came into Hamilton, there wasn't a marae at the time. So the marae became the Chatwa pub. All the tikanga changed. They became what I understand to be the Once Warriors generation. So what that did is that it helped me to understand the environment that I was born into. Why I never learned my language, my culture, my identity, my heritage. Why I ended up in such impoverished circumstances. That led me to the journey that I've taken through to today.
Kia ora. And we'll talk shortly about your experience.
Yes.
And before we get there, though, you mentioned your father,
Yes.
Who is under generation 2
Yes.
of that
Yes.
of that diagram.
Yeah. And so he was taken into social welfare care in 1954.
And what do you know of his experience in social welfare care?
His experience was very traumatic. He experienced a lot of beatings, a lot of trauma. He had no one to help him deal with that. And so what happened is, what he experienced, he pretty much applied to his family. That was his role model.
And how did his experience impact on your early journey in life?
Well, our home was very abusive, extreme violence, extreme childhood trauma. I experienced flashbacks to that trauma. I would go into trance as a coping mechanism for dealing with it. And at that time, no one helped me do that. In fact, I didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't until many, many years later.
Did your at-home experience bring you to the attention of the state?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell us about that?
So I was 5. I was going to school with bruises, and as a result of that, came under the scrutiny of the teachers, youth aid officer, who called them in. One day I was invited to come in the classroom, and they said, we're going for a ride. And so I got in the car with them, and they ended up in a place called Tower Hill.
Did anyone explain to you why you were being taken to Tower Hill?
No.
What was your experience when you got to Tower Hill?
Actually, I didn't understand what was going on. I think I had a feeling that my family would come and get me. So my room was right by the door. So I would have whatever gear I had packed, and I just remember standing there waiting for them, and waiting for them, and waiting for them. And so these days turned into weeks, turned into months, turned into a year. So after about a year, they came and got me. But by that time, I was really angry with them. I felt quite abandoned.
Did anyone help facilitate contact with your whānau during that period?
Not that I know of. I know years later, my mum said that she contacted the police. They just told her that I was with them, but didn't tell her where.
Can you recall any instances of abuse in that first year that you spent at Tower Hill?
Not so much the first time, but the second time, yes.
Okay.
So I went there, yeah.
And we'll move on to that shortly.
Yes.
Now, after that first year, you say your parents came, and
Yes.
Did you end up moving home with them?
Yes, I went home with them for a little while. When I got there, I found I had another brother. Things did change for a little while, but after a while they just went back to how it was originally. Yeah.
Can you recall what either social welfare or the police did or didn't do to support you moving home, or the circumstances of you going back home? Can you tell us anything about that?
To be honest, not really. 1 minute I'm on Tower Hill, the next minute I'm at home. Maybe they had discussions with their parents, but I wasn't part of that discussion.
Can you recall social workers coming to visit, or any support being put in place for you to help you go back home after a year?
I don't recall them coming, no.
How long were you at home for before you moved away from home again?
Maybe about 6 months.
And can you recall why you moved out?
Yes. My father had gone to the pub, and my mother had gone to housing. And so I was responsible for looking after my little brother. It was raining really heavily, like a flash flood. And then the rain stopped, and the roads were flooded. And all the children in the neighbourhood got out their buckets and went to go play in the drains. It looked like fun. I knew I had to look after my brother, but I wanted to go out and play with the neighbours. So I put him out on the porch, just so I can keep an eye on him. And I went out and played. I got so engrossed in playing with my friends and neighbours, and I didn't notice that it started raining again. And it started raining quite heavily. It was only when I heard my little brother crying that I realised that he was getting wet. So I remember going and picking him up, toweling him off, and taking him inside. Unfortunately, my little brother was only 12 months old. He caught the flu and he died 7 days later. I remember the screams of my family. How did this happen? Yep. I was only 6 or 7 at the time. But if I would have told them what had happened, I knew my father would kill me.
Have you since spoken to them, spoken to your whānau about that, though?
Yeah, I have now, yeah. Yeah.
At that stage, what happened with you?
After the funeral, we talked to karakia in prayer. It was my mother's way of dealing with grief. One day our father came home and he saw us in prayer. and kicked us all to the ground and started beating us. Because he blamed God for taking his son.
Were you, soon after that, sent again to Tower Hill?
Yeah. It was again when he was assaulting my mother, something in me just snapped. And I just remember yelling at him, and then he started hitting me. My mum got in between, and he knocked her unconscious. And so that was, it set something in me, yeah. Yeah. He was asleep in the bedroom, and I set the bed on fire with him in it.
Can we look now at that second time at Tower Hill? And can you tell us about your experience when you went there for the second time?
I think two things. Going to school, being a state ward, was quite hard. I used to get bullied because I was a state ward, had no family.
Who would do the bullying?
Just kids at school. This is what they do, yeah. But I grew up in an environment where if someone gets in your face, you respond. So I responded, and next minute I'm sitting in front of the principal's office wondering what the heck I'm doing here.
What would you say now about the culture of Tower Hill, for example, of the time when you spent there in care?
The first part of it was good, but what I actually saw in the second time around, there's a lot of corporal punishment. You were strapped for a lot of things. But the funny thing about it is that it was actually quite soft compared to what I got at home. But what became quite significant the second time round is that one day I was in the laundry, had some towels, and because it's a 3-story building, Tower Hill, but I was coming from the second floor into the first, and there was a man standing there. He had his arms around one of the staff members with a gun pointed at his head. He wasn't happy that the social welfare had taken his daughter, and he came to take her back. So he made us all go into the lounge and lie on the ground. And he took his daughter, and for the next 5 weeks, the police and the army were chasing him up and down the country until they caught him. And his daughter, her name is Gwenda, she ended up coming back to Tower Hill.
Was anything done to support you or the other children and young people at Tower Hill following that?
No.
Can we move to where paragraph 55 of your brief, where you talk about moving to a foster home?
Yes.
Sure. Can you tell us about your foster home experience?
Well, both my foster parents were European. British father, Italian mother. I suppose you have to contextualise what was going on between 1979 1981. Dame Whina Cooper had done the march from up north down to Wellington. My auntie Eva Rickard was involved in the Raglan Golf Course with the occupied. Then Bastion Point was happening at the same time. So while it was happening, it was frustrating my European foster parents who had seen these things. And usually they take their frustrations out on me.
And in what ways did they do that?
Just the way that they spoke and undermined Maori. I didn't understand what they were saying or why, but all I knew is that it made me angry. That was my first experience of racism.
What sort of things can you recall them saying?
Not necessarily can recall what they were saying, but I can recall the way it made me feel.
Well, how did it make you feel?
It made me feel degraded. It made me feel undermined. I didn't even understand why. And of course, 81 was the Springbok tour, and that just topped it. And it was about Māori this, Māori that. Yeah, we should have been grateful for what happened there.
Apart from the way they spoke to you and what you've described as the racist way in which they've spoken to you, were there other ways in which they took their frustrations out on you, physically, for example?
Yep, the father was, again, like one day he was giving me a hiding and I laughed. And he said, "What's so funny?" I said to him, "You hit like a pussy compared to my father."
What were some of the emotional or psychological impacts on you, or how did that negatively affect you?
Yeah, I think it affected my self-esteem. And then when I think about 1982, I became quite suicidal. I was self-harming. I didn't like my life, not at all.
Now, again, at any time during that point, did anyone offer some support to help you with the way that you were feeling or the way that you were acting?
No.
What involvement did you have with a social worker or social welfare, the social welfare system, while you were in foster care? How often were they in your life?
They actually did come about once a month or so, but it was to sit down, have a cordial, and then they go. I didn't see any relevance, to be honest.
Now, how long were you in foster care for with foster parents?
79 to 84. So 74 to 79 in Tower Hill, 79 to 84 in foster homes, and 84 to 86 in boys' homes.
In 84, you moved to a boys' home. Where did you move?
Hamilton Boys' Home.
Can you tell us about your experience there? And you've discussed that, and I think we're at paragraph 56 of your brief.
In the Hamilton Boys' Home, they had a security unit, and then administration, and then they had the wings. Now, the security unit was pretty much like a prison cell. They treated you quite harsh there. But the reason why they did that was that, well, I feel, is that they wanted to make it so uncomfortable that you will never come back. But I also feel that it didn't work. I saw people come in and out of there all the time. Yeah. The boys' homes is definitely the next step into prison. and I'll probably explain that a little bit later. Yeah.
Well, before we move in that direction, is there anything you wanted to say around the culture of the boys' homes in terms of any physical abuse that you may have seen or witnessed there?
I probably experienced more physical altercations in the boys' homes than I did in the prisons. But other thing I want to acknowledge is that a lot of those young men in the boys' homes, I knew them from the foster homes. I knew them from the social welfare homes. So all of us grew up in that environment, going through social welfare homes, foster homes, and boys' homes.
And what sort of environments did you all come from before entering that system?
So nearly all of us came from, in fact, nearly all of us came from impoverished environments.
And how many of those that you knew were Maori?
Probably out of 50, 49 were Maori.
So many Maori.
Yes.
Earlier you talked about these places, the system being a preparation for prison.
Yes.
And we hear often the words pipeline, prison pipeline.
Yes.
Did that become a reality for you in around 1987?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. Can you tell us briefly about that?
Yeah. Well, the thing about being in the boys' home is that when I moved into the prisons, first day I probably knew about 80% of the people. And so when you talk about our pipeline to prison process, you know, that was actually my experience. It's also the experience of my father. I don't know about my grandfather, but I do know about my father. So he went through the same process as well. Social welfare homes, Borstal prison.
And so you went into prison the first time because you were convicted of murder, is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us about some of the other people that were in prison with you and their backgrounds of what you knew of them?
I come from a place in Hamilton called Enderley. Now in Enderley, in the same street, in the street adjacent to us, there were 6 of us, all convicted of murder. All came from the same environment. We experienced the same thing. We were all in the social welfare homes, in the foster homes, in the boys' homes.
Now, since then, you've done a lot of personal growth
Sure.
and reflection.
Yeah.
What's your overall reflection on some of the, you referred to it, paragraph 59, psychological baggage that you've referred to there,
Sure.
that you were carrying from your upbringing and that environment?
Yeah.
What's some of your reflections on that?
Well, early on I talked about my own experience of severe child trauma. Going into trances as a coping mechanism for dealing with the abuse and flashbacks. I talked a little bit about my friend Gwendaro in the social welfare in Tower Hill. We met up again when we were 17. It was about that time where we heard about a story very similar to our own. A 5-year-old being abused by his father. 6 months later, things came to a head. We were sharing our own experiences of abuse, and the mother of the child was there. And she told us more about what was happening to her son. That was the time when I realised, on reflection, I was carrying my own psychological baggage. I didn't even know I had it. But hearing that story impacted me to such a degree, I ended up superimposing my own story, my own history over the boy to such a degree. I went and I fought and I killed his father. And when I got to my trial, what I found out was that everything I'd been told was a lie. It wasn't about abuse at all. It was actually about a life insurance policy. And so when I began to reflect on what happened, I came to this conclusion. That my own experiences of trauma, my own history, my own demons, my own anger at my father cost an innocent man his life. And so I was convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison.
And how long of that sentence did you serve?
Nearly 11, so 10 years, 7 months, yeah.
And were you granted parole after that period?
Yes, I was, yes.
Was that the first time that you'd applied for parole?
Yes, it was, yeah. I was lucky. I'd done a lot of work in prison. I actually helped form kohanga reo with prison staff and their families. So I was the groundsman. I became a facilitator in Alternatives to Violence program. And as an inmate facilitator, I worked with hundreds and hundreds of men dealing with alternative ways of helping to deal with anger. And so as a result of, doing that, I went to the parole. I was given a weekend to go home, and when I came back, I was released. So lifers have a category from A to E. So E and C, basically likelihood of getting up, no. And then B is minimum, minimum requirements. A is no requirements. And so as a result of the work I'd done in prison, I became the only A qualified lifer in the country. So I had no requirements.
Thank you. At paragraph 63 of your brief, you talk about this idea of overcoming deficit legacies.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about that?
I'm a big believer in addressing the past. What I came to understand is that even though I'd done my time, I came to the understanding that there are people out in the community who were still hurting. And they were still hurting because of my actions. So I recognised I had two deficit legacies I needed to address. The first one was with the family of the man whose life I took. And the second one was with the shame I brought about on my own family. So the first deficit legacy I got to address is when I became a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was in the temple when I came across an uncle as a man whose life I took. And I remember putting myself in his shoes, and I thought to myself, how would I feel if I came face to face with a person who murdered a member of my family? How would I respond? And he said to me, if I'd met you anywhere else, he said, I would never forgive you. He said, but you're here in the house of the Lord, and I want to tell you I forgive you. And he said to me, come with me. I want you to come and meet my family. So I went with him to his home. He called everyone together. And I got up to introduce myself. I actually thought they were going to be really angry, really abusive. But I stood up. I told them who I was. I told them what happened. And I told them why. But instead of experiencing abuse, they rose as a family. They surrounded me and they put their arms around me and they said, we forgive you. We ended up doing an article in the Waikato Times together. It was about the redemption of David Karena. I always talk about this because it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. Because it exposed me to the world with all my faults, my flaws, scars, warts and all. But what I recognised was this. It was necessary because it gave this family their own voice. It allowed us to start our healing, our transforming journey together. And the second deficit legacy I got to address when I joined the education field 22 years ago. I knew I was going to become a doctor way back then because I wanted to use education as a vehicle to establish a new legacy, one that my family could be proud of. And so that's when I studied for my bachelor degree, Maori counsellor, and I became a counsellor, worked in the social work, mental health. Then I started a master's in counselling, master's in commercial music, and a PhD in philosophy.
Kia ora. In relation to your time in state care, or the time of your father in state care, has anyone from the state, or have you been involved in any redress or any apology process or restorative process with the state about that part of your deficit legacy?
No, that was all, that was my own focus. I remember, in fact, I spoke with my bishop and I told him how I was feeling, recognising there are people in the community who hurt me. You know what he said to me? He said to me this. He said, do all you can to make things right. And when you've done all that you can to make things right, God's grace is sufficient to make up the difference.
Well, that, I think, puts us in a good position to talk about your PhD research and how that is relevant to our inquiry. What was it that was the driver behind you doing your PhD research on it, intergenerational trauma?
So it started from this position. I take full acceptability, full accountability of my actions. But one of the things I acknowledge is that what I didn't have control of is the environment I was born into. And so I wanted to know how the environment I was born into was created. And so I went on a journey of rediscovery, back into my history, back into the history of New Zealand, back into Indigenous history right around the world, all the way back to a document called the Doctrine of Discovery. And from the Doctrine of Discovery, it gave me answers that I never knew before. And it's from the Doctrine of Discovery that this whole colonial process came about. And so you take a stone, you drop it into a pond, it creates ripples. You're looking at intergenerational ripples. One of the things that I say in my PhD is this: don't judge a person in isolation to their history. All issues and behaviours have a whakapapa. They came from somewhere for some reason. These things didn't just manifest out of thin air. Everything has a whakapapa. Everything. And so for me, it was about looking at contributing factors to the environment that I was born into, contributing factors that led me to do the things that I did.
What were some of the things that you would identify as being those contributing factors historically in the context of your PhD research? And you've spoken about, for example, legislation and policy.
Yes.
And I'm speaking now in terms of your brief of evidence from paragraph 17.
I suppose before I go into paragraph 17, I just want to go back a little bit further to contextualise paragraph 17. Because under the Doctrine of Discovery, in the age of discovery, European monarchies wanted to do very similar to what Christopher Columbus did. And so what they did was they sent European emissaries out into the indigenous worlds to engage with indigenous peoples. But when they got there, they found other European emissaries. And so as a result, all these European emissaries and European monarchies got together and they created guidelines for engaging with indigenous people. And it was called the Doctrine of Discovery. But for it to get legal sanction that they needed the sanction of the most powerful organisation in the world at the time, which was the Catholic Church and the Pope. And they developed things like papal decrees. And here's an example of one of those papal decrees. It's called Romanus Pontifex 1455. And it said this: if you go to indigenous land and you find that indigenous people are not Christian, they would be invaded, vanquished, captured, subdued, reduced to perpetual slavery, and to have their property and possessions seized by European monarchs. And then you have another one called Territorium Res Nullius 1493. And it says that if they go to land and they find it empty, they could claim it on behalf of the European power who found it. However, there were indigenous peoples there, and they were not Christian. They didn't have right to entitlement of land, only rights of occupancy. So what that meant was that their status as human was lowered to that of a tree, a hedgehog, a deer, a weed, a rabbit. So they became known as flora and fauna. And so their status as human being was removed. Now we might actually think that that's 1493. But you know, the last time that they used the Doctrine of Discovery, terra nullius, was in 2007, and they used it against the United people, because the state said that the United people had to pay rates The United States people in New York said, wait a minute, we were here before you. They actually won their case. But the Supreme Court overturned it due to terra nullius, 2007.
Can I bring us to, with that lead-in into some of the legislation that was put in place here in Aotearoa, and one of the particular acts that you have spoken about in your brief is the Native Schools Act.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the impact of that?
I suppose, can I talk about where I came from first? So, for me, this is the whakapapa o Waranga Tamariki. Waranga Tamariki, the Department of Social Welfare. Its origins is not necessarily here in New Zealand. In fact, it was established in 1837 through the House of Commons Select Committee on Aboriginals. Now, because the British Empire colonised more indigenous countries than any other European power, they decided to set up assimilation templates and applied it right across the Commonwealth. Because their responsibility was around assimilation, what they recognised is that they couldn't change the mindset of the current indigenous peoples that they were dealing with. So they decided to go after the future generations. So as a result, the House of Commons Select Committee established the Aboriginal Acts in Australia, which led to the Stolen Generations. They established the Indian Acts in Canada and USA, and it led to the residential schools. They have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission happening right now. Why? Because thousands of children have gone missing. They also established New Zealand's experience of lost generations. And they did it through the Native Department, 1861, the Neglected and Criminal Children's Act, 1867, and the Native Schools Act, 1867. And so, while it was applied here, and it's been going on since 1921, its whakapapa and its origins actually sits in England. Okay. And so now I can probably talk about that.
In terms of some of the experiences of those who went through the native school system and were subject to that corporal punishment for speaking to their Maori, you've, at paragraph 88, taken an account, historical account of that from work of Binney and Chaplin.
Sure.
Would you care to read that for us?
Sure. So this is a sample that I took out of Judith Binney's book on Morihu. And it's an account given by Puti Puti Onekawa, who was born in 1908, and she was sent away to school in Tutakina in 1921. And she said this: I started school quite old, and I can't talk English. All we got to do is cry, because don't talk Māori in school. We can't talk English. So all we do is cry. Yes, for a long while. I can't talk English no matter what. I try, but the only thing I know is stomach. Yes, I know that. Oh yes, Sister Anne, Sister Dorothy, Sister Jessie, and Sister Langton. And Mr. Curry, he's hard, very hard. No bloody humbug. A cousin of mine, we were all sitting on the floor singing, and she was naughty. She did it on the floor because we don't know how to go outside. All she'd do is go like that, put her hand up and point outside. And this girl, she didn't want to say anything. She was sitting on her slate. She had a slate over it. We were just going to sing, and I was going like that, pointing to her. Mr. Curry gave me a good hiding. Super jack, air, across my back. It was a murdering thing. And Mr. Langton didn't like it. He knew because I don't know how to say outside.
I want to move on towards the end of your brief of evidence. We talk about the ongoing impact of colonisation. Have you come up with a model or a diagram for that? We spoke earlier about te tongi a tawhiao and the rākau used, the trees used, and that tongi, that prophecy. Have you yourself come up with your own figure to explain the ongoing, in your view, the ongoing impact of colonisation?
Yeah, yes, I have, yes.
Would you speak to us about that, please?
Sure. So this is a model I developed. It's called pūtaketanga. So pū, origin, take of the issue. So what you're doing is that you're tracking the issue back to its origins. I'm going to use the Native Schools Act as an example. When you understand the intergenerational ripple effects of the Native Schools Act, one thing you've got to understand is this. Pre-colonisation, domestic violence and child abuse was not indicative of Māori culture. Domestic violence and child abuse can be attributed straight back to the Native Schools Act. The Native Schools Act became a vehicle of assimilation to remove language, culture, identity. And so they did it through corporal punishment. And so, again, if you chop a stone and look at the whakapapa of it, what it highlights is that the source of domestic violence and child abuse is the Native Schools Act. Because it was applied to a kaumata and queer when they were vulnerable children. It rippled into the next generation, rippled into the next generation. Mariana Pittman, she says this very well. She says, colonisation taught us to hate ourselves and each other. That is the ripple effect of the Native Schools Act. And so, when it was applied to a kaumata and queer, then it was applied to the next generation, to the next generation. What happened, it doesn't make any excuses, but what it does, it contextualizes where these things came from. Because that's one of the things that happens. A lot of the systems, they apply labelling theory. And what labelling theory does, it talks about a deficit position without giving a context. But everything has a context. Everything has a whakapapa, and everything has a story. So what this is actually talking about is contributing factors. And these are the things that we don't really talk about. These are the things that are not really addressed. And so what it does, so for example, I can look at anything from poverty and track its whakapapa back. Drug and alcohol, track its whakapapa back. And so what it actually does, it takes it back to what is the root cause. And that's what this particular model does. I applied it to a colleague. I don't think I'll mention his name. But he said this. He said, Māori crime is a fact of life. Wherever you find Māori, that's where you find crime. He did a comparison between Hamilton and Christchurch and Dunedin. He said, look, a lot of Māori crime in Hamilton because there's a lot of Māori there. But hardly any Māori crime in Christchurch and Dunedin. He didn't mention the fact that, because there's Pakeha crime there. And so, one of the things I looked at is authority. So who has the authority to speak on Māori, about Māori and Māori things? He's a professor. He's from Canterbury University. He's a psychologist and a criminologist. Those are his areas of expertise. But is he expert in te reo Māori? No. Is he expert in Māori histories? No. Is he expert in Māori trauma? No. So even though he has expertise in criminology and that, it's not the expertise which is relevant. And so what I'm doing is contextualising Māori histories and Māori stories alongside colonial discourses. I was lucky to write a chapter in the Palgrave handbook on criminology and New Zealand and Australia, and that's about colonial legislation, dominant discourses, and Māori experiences of historical trauma.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about is figure 3 in your brief of evidence, and this is that. Yeah, that's up now in reference to colonisation.
Yes. So what this talks about, I call this the colonising tree. And at its roots is the doctrine of discovery, colonisation, ideologies of superiority, discrimination, racism, prejudice. So I'm saying if that's the roots, and the Māori experiences of historical intergenerational trauma is based on loss of land, loss of identity, language, culture, heritage. So what I'm saying is that if this is what you're feeding the roots, and these are what the instruments are in the trunk, then you're only going to get deficit outcomes, because what's been fed is deficits to the root. You can't feed deficits to the root and expect good outcomes. You're just not going to get it. And so, what I've also got a transformative model, and what it talks about is how you change the roots, restore the language, the cultural identity, mana, tino rangatiratanga. And then if you look at the trunks of it, it's about restoring language, cultural identity, heritage, tino rangatiratanga. And then what happens, you'll have transformative statistics instead of deficit.
And where would you place state care, abuse and care within this model here of the rako, of the tree?
It's definitely amongst that. And it's definitely it's a Māori deficit outcome, but it's also based on deficit whakapapa. Yes.
The last thing I would ask you is to share with us your hopes for this Royal Commission of Inquiry.
You know, my hope, my dream, that the Royal Commission consider is this: colonisation, both historically and in contemporary current times, it's hurt our people, and it continues to hurt our people. And the reality is this: it's not sustainable. There's a total imbalance of power. And a lot of assumptions have been made. And a lot of promises have been broken. So for me, the solutions sit with Māori. They sit with the people they always have. And Māori need space to take care of their own. I believe we have the capacity to do it. And that's why I advocate that our people work with our people to heal our people.
Kia ora.
Kia ora matata katoa.
Now, what I'll do now is I'll just check with the chair to see if there are any other questions for you.
Thank you, Mr. Merrick. Dr. Waretini Karena is available for questions from any council. Ms. Sykes.
Mōrena, ko te maunga tēnei e tū whakahi mai matawhaura. E mihiata ana ki a koe te maunga tū whakahi tarānei mō taupuri i runga i taua tu āhuatanga. Te hononga wairua ki te kengitanga hei whakaaro rangatira mō tō tātou nei kōrero e kōrero ana tāu i tarānei. He maha ku whakaaro i puta mai te mamai o kōrero i te atanei, engari kei te hoki whakamuri au, ki te ao te whakapapa o tō tipuna, pea, kei reira te rongoa, mā tātou katoa o Aotearoa nei i tēnei wā. Ka huri atu au ki tērā o ngā reo, engari i runga i taua tu āhuatanga kei te mihi atu au ki a koe e Rawiri. I want to bring Te Tiriti o Waitangi and Te He Whakaputunga as part of your kōrero today. And I want to start with the whakapapa that you shared with us. I think it's important we recognise that as a half-brother of Tāwhiao, who did not sign Te Tiriti o Waitangi, your great-grandfather is quite significant in the way you brought him into these proceedings. You would agree that Tāwhiao signed the He Whakaputunga, which is the Declaration of Māori Independence, in August 1839,
yes.
and refused to sign the treaty.
Yes.
However, your grandaunt, I heard today, Te Puia, was a follower of Te Tiriti and the values of Te Tiriti in addressing the processes of colonisation that had dispossessed your people of Tainui.
Yes.
Could you just elaborate on that history?
From Princess Te Puia?
Yeah. Why did she become a stern follower of the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, given the fact of the reality that her tipuna, Tāwhiao, did not sign Te Tiriti?
I also think it was a way of holding them to account to their own kupu. And Article 2 talks about protection of taonga. There was no protection for them at all. Protecting their mana, protecting their tamariki. And that's part of promises given and promises broken. So holding them to account to that. I can only talk from my grandfather's experiences with Princess Te Puia because he was brought up with her. All I do is when I understand she also stood tūturu to what Tāwhiao said, and he said that Tainui wouldn't fight. When they laid their guns down at Alexandria, Piriongia, that they weren't going to fight anymore. So as a result, they became conscientious objectors during World War I. And that's also something that Princess Te Puia led. And so when they were taken as conscientious objectors to Naranek, and then she would stand there outside the fence and sing to them and let her know that she was there. So, yes, yeah, for me it was about her keeping them accountable to the words that they signed on a piece of paper.
So if I can draw some threads from your kōrero. Children, tamariki, human beings are taonga. The gift of life, as Mirasazi once described, is the most important taonga protected by Article 2 of Te Tiriti. Would you agree?
Yes.
That's something that both Tāwhiao and Te Puia lived by.
Yes.
And that was affirmed in He Whakaputanga, which is the sister document that gives force to Te Riti o Waitangi. So if we bring those values to going forward with welfare of taonga, of children, of tamariki, of human beings, how do they inform us in the solutions for historical trauma?
Well, what it highlights is that they haven't done a very good job. In fact, it's been abysmal. And they haven't held to mana ki te kupu.
Translate for everybody here, so honour the words.
Yeah. So their words were not their bond. So I think, and bringing that context here, it's about putting it out there and giving context to Te Tiriti and how tamariki and honouring that. So if they didn't do that, this is the forum to bring it. And maybe that's the place from where we can start in this Royal Commission.
And your evidence highlights that the Te Tiriti o he whakaputanga did not inform the Native Lands Acts, the various social welfare acts that imprisoned your grandparent or your father and your grandfather. They were not informed by the values of those founding documents. Even though there's references, though, in the modern legislation, what's missing?
Well, what I've come to understand with the doctrine of discovery, the development of treaties was just actually getting people's foot in the door, but actually forgetting that they're also accountable to what they signed. So now, this process is about bringing them back to what is that accountability. So what am I saying is that Te tiriti o Waitangi, he wakaputanga, to me is the sister, to me it's actually the parent. He wakaputanga is the parent. There would be no te tiriti o Waitangi without he wakaputanga. The other thing is this, he wakaputanga was never ever ceded. That doesn't say that anywhere. English version might say it, but that's not signed by two parties, so therefore it's an irrelevant document.
But if we bring it, and I'm trying to look to the future rather than the past,
Okay.
social workers should be trained in the values of He Whakaputanga and Te Tiriti.
Absolutely, yes.
Was that your experience while you were in care?
I trained them in He Wakaputanga, in Declaration of Independence, and Te Tiriti Waitangi. But my colleagues trained them in the Treaty of Waitangi. And so we would always have conversations, robust conversations around that. Yeah, but it's definitely important. Our counsellors, mainstream counsellors, social workers, mental health, they're not trained in that history.
Do you sense that there is this misbelief of superior values from a Eurocentric position that subjugates Māori values, that sometimes colours people's practice? And I'd like some examples.
Yes, right across the board. I think in my experience in talking with my colleagues, they actually didn't know enough about Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It's just like speaking the reo, they would be whakamā to even try. And so I would have to take them through. And these were people who had way more experience teaching than I did. But one thing I knew was Te Tiriti o Waitangi and Wakaputanga Declaration of Independence. But not only that, I know the whakapapa of how I got to that. And so I wouldn't just teach he Wakaputanga, but it's whakapapa.
So in your last diagram, if we could put that up, and this is my last series of questions, if we are to reclaim the values, to have a prescience or an appropriateness of practice, then we have to address, don't we?
Yes.
The reclamation of identity, the reclamation of language, the reclamation of heritage,
Yes.
and the reclamation of economic well-being or prosperity or loss of land.
Absolutely.
How are we going to do that for, and I want you to think back to you as the 6-year-old child or the 12-year-old child in the tower, because that's the challenge before this commission. The big picture issues need to be given substance and incremental steps if we want to honour, I think what you said, mana I te kupu o Te Tiriti o Waitangi, to give force to the values of the honourable words of Te Tiriti o Waitangi.
If I think back to being a 6-year-old or being a 12-year-old, you know, that wasn't even in their thought process. But moving into the future, I think them learning about he Wakaputanga, learning about Te Tiriti Waitangi, learning about New Zealand history is really, really important, because what it does, it contextualises not only Māori stories, but the story of tangata tiriti, or our European partners as well. Because at the end of the day, we're all in this together. But how we work with each other to make things better for the future, really it comes down to relationships. Not partnerships, it's about relationships. And about Māori history and that being respected.
It's also about trust, isn't it?
Yes.
Isn't it about the state trusting Māori to look after our own?
Absolutely.
As Princess Tapuia wanted.
Yes.
It's about trust that Māori have solutions for our own, isn't it?
If we have a good look at whānau ora, you know, they operate on a budget that's way less than Oranga Tamariki. But what forms the basis of their practice is relationships. And yeah, it is about trust. But the thing about it is it's a kaupapa Māori service. Just by Māori, for Māori.
And that requires respect.
Yes.
And it
Mana
requires,
ki te tangata, yes.
And it requires resources, which is what
Absolutely.
you just talked about.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms Sykes. Any other council? Thank you. Mr Diakid.
Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe.
Doctor, my name's Mrs. Fiona Guy Kidd and I represent the Anglican Church of Aotearoa, New Zealand and Polynesia. Thank you for your powerful evidence of your meeting with the family of your victim and you explaining your offending and why that had occurred and receiving their forgiveness. I'd like to ask some questions exploring and seeing what we can learn from that meeting that you went through. How long after your offending did that occur?
12 years.
And did you receive any feedback as to how the victim's family found that meeting or what they gained from it?
we're still friends to this day. So, yes, they also serve in my church. So, yeah.
And what impact did that meeting have on you?
I suppose for me it was about reconciliation, it was about redemption. I've developed a program, it's called He Kakonoaho, and it recognises that you're a seed born of greatness descended from my line of chiefs. And so I'm in the process of taking that into the prisons. And it's about helping men to unpack the stories to help them make sense of their current reality. But part of that process is accountability. Maori had a process, it was called kokonga ngākau, where you would have the person who is offended, the person who's been offended, a facilitator, and you would have the hapu. Under Rawiri, the person who is offended can only talk about what they contributed to the offence. That's it. Once that process has taken place, the facilitator steps back, the person who's been offended steps back, and then the hapu makes a decision about how to move forward in a way that saves faith and mana for those who've been offended and those who are offended. So I talk about it in a traditional sense. And so it's asking them to understand it in that context. And so what that's about is about when you take account of your own actions and you can actually walk with your head high in your community. And regardless of what everyone comes to say about you, challenge you about your history, your past, you've already dealt with it. Because I've had an instance, I had a student, for example, who didn't like the mark and grade I gave her. And she said to me, I want you to change the mark. And I said, for me it's based on the evidence you provided. And she said this to me. She said, I know your history, I've read about you. If you do not change your mark, I'm taking this to the media. So I'm a lecturer, in a tertiary education. But because I'd already dealt with it, I dealt with it this way. Opened up my drawer, I pulled out my newspaper article about me and the family and how we met in the temple, and it was about our story of redemption. And I said to her, well, when you go to the media, can you give them this? And so what it highlights it took away the power to be used against me, because that's been something that I've always brought to the fore.
So do you think that face-to-face, essentially restorative justice process is important after abuse?
While I do, I'm also sensitive to those who've been offended. And so it is a restorative justice process, so both parties have to be willing to go there for it to proceed. But yes, I do.
And perhaps just a final topic then, given what you've just said there, where there's a representative possible of the offender, for instance, a representative of the state or of the church, would that still have a benefit, do you believe, for victims?
Do you mean in terms of restorative process?
Yes, participating in place of the offender, so instead of the offender.
Well, one of the things that I understand is this. Evil exists in the dark. Evil exists in secret. The only way to overcome that type of evil is to shine a light on it. You shine a light on it so it no longer has power over you or anyone else. And I think this is the power of these courageous people who stand up and telling their story. Because now that history will no longer have power over them. And it will bring about the process of healing, something that has been meaning to come for generations.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Darkid. No other counsel? Colleagues, Dr. Edwiti, do you have any questions of Dr. Waretini Karena?
Tēnā koe, tēnā tāku te Waretini Karena, ko anu i rui tuku ingoa o Tauraki. Ka nui te mihi ki a koe, tu whakaro nui. Tēnā koe. I also have a question, Takata, about the impacts of land loss. So it's going back to Paris 41 to 43 of your brief of evidence. And I wanted to ask of you about the indication there is that you have Murumeta Raupatu and Waikato, yes, vast areas of land taken from
1 million acres.
1 million acres, thank you. And then in paragraph 42 you talk about Maori battalion soldiers coming back home from the war,
Yes.
and yet more land was taken from them and given to settler soldiers.
Yes.
If you could elaborate more on that process about how that land was taken, was there legislation also, such as the Tūrewhenua Māori legislation?
So it was a ballot, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what was interesting about that is that when they came back, as a result of the war, they felt that because Māori already owned land, that the land was only given to the settler soldiers. But it was at the expense of those who had land in the first place. Dr. Ranginui Walker talks about even those Māori who had land in the rural sectors, and they went into the cities to find jobs because they were away from their land. The council went and put rates on them and took them, yeah. And so it's an example that my grandfather, he was a member of the 28th Māori Battalion Company C. Now that's quite extraordinary because he's from Waikato Tainui. But what happened at the time is that he was a young man shearing sheep over in Ngāti Porou when the war started. And so he went to war with his mates. And so he signed up under Ngāti Porou. But he's actually Waikato Tainui. This process is not new. That's what happened at Ihumatao. They had newspaper clippings that basically said, you know, if you come and join a fight on our behalf, you will get a certain amount of acres of land. So they did it in the 1860s, and they did it in the 1940s. So, yeah. So I'm not sure if you want me to elaborate on that.
I mean, you're describing there that everything has a whakapapa,
Yes.
so loss of the land, and then
Yes.
your father's generation then migrate to the cities.
Yes.
And you talk about the pepper potting strategy.
Yes.
Would you be able to unpack that more for us about
Sure.
pepper potting, what that actually means?
Well, the pepper potter strategy, back in the 30s, 40s, or even before that, Māori lived in communes, communities. And so what they wanted to do was break those communities up, because that's what actually gave them access to land. And so
the pepper potting processes, they mixed Maori and Pakeha communities together. Made all the land, all the jobs available in the cities. So therefore it moved Maori off their land. And I want to be very clear too, it was a very intentional practice. Because those are the same policies that they used in other indigenous countries, which they found quite successful. And so a lot of the legislative policies that they used were imported from other countries, Australia, Scotland, Ireland. I mean, Ireland, that's where the New Zealand Separation Act 1863 came from, because it was successful over there.
Thank you. Yeah, any other colleagues? Judge Shaw?
Kia ora, Dr. Waretini Karena. You've put forward a powerful and a deep whakapapa about the roots of what's going on in terms of the taking of children, the abuse of children in this country. With your experience also in terms of mental health and counselling, I'm assuming the same whakapapa about what's happening in terms of Māori communities around mental health, suicide rates could be attributed to the same origins?
Yes, they can. In fact, it's a systemic outcome. And so when I talk about addictions, even crime, those all have a whakapapa in poverty. They have a whakapapa for Māori in intergenerational poverty. And so that's when we talk about, okay, where did that come from? That's the dispossession, that's taking of land, cultural identity at the point of a gun.
And from your work in services and counselling, all that, the same principles of tēnā rangatiratanga could apply to care in terms of the mental health system?
Yes, I think you can, yes.
Sure.
Thank you. Ms. Alofi Vai.
Dr. Waretini Karena, tēnā koe, whātanga whātul pa i man malwalau tangata. Thank you for the powerful honesty in which you shared your evidence this morning. My question really rises out of your comment that I found really encouraging around, you were referring to some redemptive frameworks that you found very useful in how you were able to get to that place of a peace,
yes,
a sustainable, long-lasting peace. And it's really about going back to the roots of your tree. If you thought, any comments you might have around, given that redemptive justice isn't always rooted in the legislation,
yes,
if that was a possible tool that we should actually be looking at and unpacking in a much more incentivised way. Yeah.
I believe so, because the current model is very punitive. There's no healing process in punitiveness. You don't get to the root cause to punitive measures. How I came to the place that I did, I was about 5-6 years into my sentence. And then the actress, her name was Miranda Harcourt, she brought a play to prison called A Verbatim Act of Murder. She played 6 different characters, all impacted by murder. So I asked her, what did you hope to achieve by sharing this with us? And then she said to me, how would you answer that? And this is when I got the idea of a stone dropping into a pond and creating ripples. The main character that she was playing thought he was only hurting one person, but didn't realise the impact of his actions actually rippled throughout the community. So when I was alone in my cell reflecting on what I heard, you know what? My inner voice said this to me: what about the impact in the community you had? And I tell you what, I was stunned. I was shocked. I never ever thought about that before. And the reason why I hadn't thought about it, I was whakamā. I was whakamā to look at my own history. I was whakamā to really understand the impact of my actions. And that's when I came to understand, well, there's a community out there that's hurting because of me. My own family, I had my mother, she was hiding away at home due to whakamā. I had my brother being assaulted at school just for being related to me. And so that's when I came to understanding is that there's some work I've got to do, that there are deficit legacies that I need to address because I couldn't. But I think at the heart of that was actually understanding that I'd taken the life of an innocent man. And so for me, what it was about accepting my sentence and accepting everything that went with it. But I remember asking myself this question. I went so low, I hit the bottom of the bottom. And it was probably about three years into my sentence. And I remember looking in the mirror, looking at myself, and I didn't like what I saw. So I got out and I was looking through the bars at the stars. And I came to this conclusion, is I can continue looking at the bars and stay institutionalized, or I can look at the stars and I realize if this is what bottom looks like, what does top look like? And so from there, in 1988 in my cell, I decided to strive. And I've been doing that ever since.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Waretini Karena. The Royal Commission has been enriched by your evidence and your insights. Thank you. Mr. Merrick, I think this will be a suitable time for us to take the morning adjournment.
Kua heke tēnei nohoanga, tēnā koa e tū. This sitting is adjourned, all stand. Just a reminder, we'll be breaking for 15 minutes and then we'll start again. Thank you.